Very good, guys. We're about to start our second last panel, and I would actually argue the most interesting one, because we've actually heard about what the industry thinks of itself. We're about to hear from some really, really important institutions, people who have actually driven change at a policy level and piloted some truly innovative schemes. So I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Paolo Bortolin, City of Lugano Deputy Finance, Department City of Lugano. Please welcome. Thank you. David Newns, the Chief Executive Officer of SDX. Thomas Moser, Alternative Board Member of the Swiss National Bank. Thank you very much for joining us today and coming from Zurich. And Vincent Gusdorf, Head of DeFi and Digital Asset Analytics from the best rating agency, Moody's. And last but not least, our wonderful host tonight, this evening rather, Sascha Wullschleger, Head of Wealth Management at BIL Bank International Luxembourg, the co-organizer of the event. Over to you guys. Thank you.
Well, I think that today we have heard quite a lot of interesting panels. We have been hearing about innovation, engagement, content, awareness, networking, education, government in Web3 era. Then we were also thinking about the entry point, DeFi, Gamify, DeSci, IE, data, and tokenization. That's a lot of information in a few hours. And this is for the third year that we're talking about this. And I'm actually very proud that we bring so much content and value to the audience. And then also, I have to thank everyone that is here on the panels with me right now. But a special thank you goes to Thomas, of course, Moser, who today he was very busy and we had to pray him to come down, but he did it. So please, an applause for him. And then, of course, everybody else who's here present. I think that we were talking about regulation and how this can all be done. And there was one question by Claude today that said, well, which country is actually very advanced and is implementing what we're actually doing today? Well, I think that in a very comfortable way, humble way, I can say that Switzerland is for sure one of the most advanced cutting-edge countries in implementing innovation. And for sure, one of these reasons, I also feel very honored that I'm working in Lugano, in the city of Lugano, and here next to Paolo, of course, with whom we have been collaborating. And well, I think that Lugano launched their first digital bond last year. This year they came to the market again. And Paolo, please tell us what's the difference now with what you have done last year and what you did this year?
Yeah, hello. Yes, you hear me? First of all, thank you very much for the invitation and for this great panel for the second year. Maybe we can continue in the future with new bonds and new innovation, right? Well, first of all, I would like to just to underline that last year I said I issued the first bond, digital bond, and I'm going to continue issue my bonds in a digital form. I promised that and I did it. So last February I did issue the second one, which from, let's say, from the point of view of my process, it was really easy because, as I said, last year it took me 6 months to get ready for the issue. It was completely new. This time it took me a couple of hours and a couple of calls. So I'm basically back to my, let's say, process I had before with the standard bonds, which took me 2 hours, 3 hours to do it. And this time was exactly the same. So to me, this is the real new standard. I'm not going to move to the digital bond. I said last year, I'm stating again, this will be my way to issue bonds. This year, probably not many because I don't need it this year, but next year I'm coming back to the market. So we will have new digital bonds in the future. What is really different with this last new bond? Well, for me, really nothing. The process was the same, but the bond has been settled with a wholesale CBDC. So the central bank issued a real wholesale CBDC, but Thomas will explain you more than that. And this is really something that never happened before. I'm not the first one. We are 4, actually 5 bonds now, yeah, so since a couple of days, so you will explain that. And this settlement between banks in a wholesale CBDC, a real one, a productive one, is just amazing to me. So it states another time that Switzerland is really innovative, and our Swiss National Bank is just amazing. I'm in love with the Swiss National Bank compared to the others, to the other central banks, which are talking a lot, but then, Swiss National Bank is talking and doing projects. So that's my point.
Thank you for explaining that. But let's not undermine what you guys actually did, because from what I heard in the news of yesterday, I mean, you guys were the ones who did the settlement in CBDC, but I heard that the World Bank issued a Swiss bond on SDX. So, I mean, we're talking about City of Lugano and after the World Bank. Thomas, please tell us something about this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, even though the weather actually is nicer in Zurich for a change. But really good to be here. So, as you said, yesterday we heard the news that actually the World Bank now also issued on SDX against wholesale CBDC provided by the Swiss National Bank, but Lugano was first. Absolutely. So, as Paolo said, the real news is that we are doing the real thing here. I mean, we have infrastructure, DLT-based infrastructure for digital bonds that is licensed, that is regulated, and the securities are settled with central bank money, and that's really unique. That is basically what is done in the traditional world, but now everything on the new technology. And for us, it's this pilot where we said we would now for a half year provide wholesale CBDC in a production environment. A lot of all central banks are still in a test environment, but this is in a production environment. It's a live wholesale CBDC. It's the real thing, and for that, very exciting. As Paolo said, we have now seen during this pilot 5 bond issuances with the World Bank yesterday, and I expect still to see some more. And we are currently discussing also at the Swiss National Bank how we then take this forward once this pilot ends at the end of June.
And this was actually already my second question for you is, okay, now in Switzerland we're doing this, Lugano has done that. How do you see this actually developing in other jurisdictions and other countries, or even, I guess you guys collaborate with the central bank? How do you see this development going forward?
Yeah, what is interesting to see that a lot of central banks talked about retail CBDC. So CBDC for the people to use to make day-to-day payments. We had from the beginning focused on wholesale CBDC for security settlement together with SDX, with 6. And what we see now is that other central banks are also more and more moving in this direction. So we have this head start, thanks, of course, to SDX, thanks to issuers like Lugano, so that we can actually not just test it, but do it live. But we see that other central banks are getting more and more interested into that. And but it's not that easy, because to do that, of course, you need a fully licensed, regulated DLT exchange, and luckily we have that in Switzerland. And this is just a nice pass over to to David.
Well, exactly. Thank you very much, David. This actually, you must have read what we prepared together, Thomas, because it was the next question. No? So, David, this settlement with CBDC, what does this really mean for the Swiss digital exchange? And really looking forward for the fact that you guys are fully regulated. I mean, before we were talking by different exchanges and everything, but in Switzerland, we have already looked at that, we have prepared that, and we are, again, extremely advanced. Can you please tell us more?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that it is the case that it's only here in Switzerland, anywhere in the world, any developed economy, that we're having security settlement in wholesale CBDC. Now, it's a critical foundational component for capital market infrastructure, because if you don't have a riskless settlement asset at the sort of the foundational layer, the bottom level of your edifice, your architecture of the capital markets, then there's risk implicit in the system. So any stable coin, any sort of tokenized money that isn't ultimately backed by the central bank has risk associated with it. And what that means is that as a financial institution, a bank, for instance, you have to hold capital on your balance sheet to offset against that risk. So the more activity you want to carry out, the more capital you have to hold. So that basically is a massive scaling issue. You just simply cannot scale in that context. So you certainly can't expect the market to migrate onto blockchain-based infrastructure if that is the case, because every time you ask them to do more, it's going to cost them more, just simply to hold the capital to enable the transactions to ultimately occur. But when in the case of central bank money, you don't have to do that, which is why, as part of the principles of financial market infrastructure, we should be settling transactions in central bank money. And that's why you need to have a tokenized version of that to be able to actually carry out these activities on blockchain. So for us, it was a piece of the puzzle that was absolutely required to be provided for us to then build everything else on top of that. So in terms of us building out a network of participants on SDX, carrying out not only securities transactions for bonds, but all sorts of other use cases where they want to interact with each other and settle transactions of digital assets, ultimately you need to have this piece in place. So although the Swiss National Bank is very kind in saying that, I appreciate you recognizing the fact that you had a regulated infrastructure to be able to carry out these explorations and bring this whole process forwards in terms of adoption and getting more confidence about being able to provide tokenized central bank money. Without having tokenized central bank money, SDX is really going to be, we're going to have a critical component, a gear that's missing from the engine. It means we cannot proceed really, I think, with adoption. So that's what it means for us. And I think what we've seen as a result since Helvetia III was announced, which is the piloting of CBDC, we've seen an increasing momentum within our customer base, within the industry. And at this point in time, with the World Bank bond issuance a couple of days ago, we've now issued over 1 billion francs worth of bonds on the platform, 600 million plus of that in settling in wholesale CBDC. So I think that it's right to say that here in Switzerland, there's really momentum being gathered and capacity being built.
Thank you for sharing that. What do you see going on now in the next 12 months? I mean, we have come a way long until what we were able to settle now. What do you see coming for the next 12 months?
Well, we obviously wait with bated breath as to what the Swiss National Bank will do post the end of the pilot on the 30th of June. I think I've made quite the statement about how very important it is that we have a CBDC on the platform. So first of all, I would like to see a continuation of support for wholesale CBDC and a move in the sort of direction of ultimately going fully into production with that, because I think that's really important for maintaining momentum within the market and maintaining and achieving that adoption. What I also think will happen in that context is the network effects that we're going to get on the blockchain that we run. As we get more market participants on board because they have the confidence that is moving in a particular direction, then the sort of use cases that they are going to explore and implement on SDX will also mean we'll see a proliferation of benefits of the underlying blockchain technology being utilized by those market participants. So up until now, we've had lots of bond issuances on the platform because there are lots of bond issuances. So it's a kind of a useful sort of ammunition to carry out these activities within. But I think the real benefits are going to come, or certainly there's also interesting opportunities to happen outside of fixed income in other digital asset use cases. So what's traditionally not been bankable assets being to actually issued and settled on the blockchain, and other use cases around things like collateral mobilization and so on. So I think that it'll be more use cases than simply issuance, trading, and settlement of fixed income.
Thank you. Vincent, last year, you, with the first issuance of the City of Lugano bond, you had to do, I guess, quite a lot of due diligence in order to make sure that from a rating perspective, the bond would have exactly the same value as in traditional assets. This year, there was a new issuance, but this time it was settled with CBDC.
Yep.
What is your take on this, and what is the agency actually saying about this, and how do you expect things moving forward from here?
Well, we're very pleased to see the market gaining momentum here. When we look at the historical numbers, so far there's been a little bit more than 60 digital bonds issued worldwide. Last year, 28 digital bonds were put on the market. I think as of now, we're probably near 2,000 already. So we do see an acceleration. Now, with regards to how we look at digital bonds, and in particular how we look at digital bond issued on SDX, the process is now very smooth. Basically, our approach is to consider the digital component as a wrapper around the traditional security. Therefore, when we analyze such instruments, we're going to involve both the fundamental analysts and the digital finance team to which I belong. As far as the fundamental component is concerned, I think our rationale for the AA3 rating of Lugano is quite clear. We like the governance, we like the sound financial policy, and so on. With regards to the digital component, we are organizing our assessment around 4 pillars. I'm not going to go through all of them because actually I already described them last year, so I'm pleased to say that our approach has not changed, but broadly speaking, what we're looking at is the quality of the platform, the legal environment, the cyber risk, and so on. So now the process is very smooth. We know the platform. The only difference compared to the other digital bond that Lugano issued last year was the CBDC angle. On that front, we viewed it as something positive for the rating because, as David explained, it reduces a little bit the credit risk that can arise during the settlement. Compared to last year, the improvement was sufficiently noticeable for AA3 rating to be noted by the committee members. So that was something that was also very, very positive. But more broadly, what we like about the CBDC is that it provides fuel for the digital finance ecosystem. And we think that with such an instrument, either in Switzerland or abroad, digital markets are going to thrive.
Recently, we had the ETF that was launched on Bitcoin, and we all, of course, heard that how much money actually flew into this ETF in like 5 months, and I guess we are over 15 billion that actually entered into this ETF, and from some of my very sophisticated clients told me that it took 3 years for the ETF in gold to get 11 billion, so we see where money is flowing, and we also understand why sometimes they use ETFs. But then we also heard the announcement by BlackRock of doing the tokenized fund for 100 million. Mm-hmm. What is your view on that?
Tokenized funds are another very promising application of distributed ledger technology. If we compare this use case to digital bonds, there is a clear incentive for asset managers to move to the blockchain. It cuts their distribution costs and it enables them to create a secondary market where there was previously none. So the incentive is clear, and we are seeing a lot of momentum in this direction. Now, I think what's interesting is that compared to digital bonds, the type of actors we are seeing in this space are, of course, large established institutions like Franklin Templeton, KKRs, and others. But we do see also a number of much smaller actors. And I think here for a rating agency, it's a little bit of a challenge because the technology providers that create the platform supporting these transactions don't necessarily have the same experience as other actors like SGX. In particular, the weakest spots we've noticed are, first off, with regard to their track records, and as a result, the ability to function under a variety of conditions. I think this one is relatively straightforward. But interestingly, the more we go to committee, the more we realize that very often the most vulnerable area of this structure is the stablecoin. Why? Because in all these jurisdictions, you don't have a CBDC. And therefore, to invest, people need to use stablecoin in certain situations. So that even though the fund itself can invest in, let's say, AAA rated securities such as T-bills, if you need to be exposed to a stablecoin to enter this area, it can create a little bit of an issue, which is why, again, we think that wholesale CBDCs, from our perspective, are the way to go for the market.
David, what is your opinion on this?
Yeah, I would completely agree. As I mentioned before, the need to have this base layer of a risk settlement asset, I think means that the trust of the entire system is sort of predicated on that. And that what you don't want to have, whether it's security transactions that cannot be allowed to fail, Otherwise, the market will lock up. You'll lose fundamentally trust in the market, which would be catastrophic, and therefore that's not considered permissible, as it were, when it comes to the management of the wholesale space, or a failure of interbank payments. Those can't happen because you would lose faith in the entire sort of economy. And that's one of the roles of the central bank, is to make sure that faith is never lost, because they're responsible for monetary stability and for ensuring that there's financial stability within the economy.
Today we heard also by Hans-Peter that he recently participated at a FINMA conference, and out of how many banks did participate, you told me? 200 plus banks were present, and more than 35 banks are starting to offer some sort of blockchain crypto services. I'm aware that the Swiss Central Bank, together with the Center of Innovation of Finance, the University of Basel, you guys have a yearly conference on crypto assets and innovation. And this is going to be taking place next week on the 24th of May. And one very nice thing that we also were able to organize from last year's President of Thomas is that this year the keynote and guest speaker of the event will be Gavin Wood. And we all know, of course, who he is and what it means for Polkadot ecosystem. Can you tell us a little bit more? I saw the agenda, and I saw that, basically all the central banks, or very important central banks, are present. Also, BIS is present. Can you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. So this is a conference, annual conference. I think it's the 5th one already, and we had to have a break when the pandemic was here. So it's an academic conference in the first place, and it's mainly for central bankers, academics, but then we also have some people from the fintech or from the blockchain scene. So the topics are all kinds of crazy things that you can do on blockchains, and we get very interesting ideas from these conferences. We had one project that we did together with the Monetary Authority of Singapore and with the Banque de France, which was just a test. It was not like here in the production environment, but we built together a decentralized exchange like Uniswap or Curve on Ethereum testnet, and then exchanged wholesale CBDCs among us. So this is a very important source for new ideas, a very important source for new contacts. And of course, we are very happy that Gavin will be able to be our keynote speaker. And thank you for that again.
It's a pleasure. And here, of course, we have to thank Skytail, the guys of Skytail, together with Christoph and Mark, that helped us to convince him to go. So this is a big honor. Thank you very much, Mark, for doing this. And talking about innovation, talking about adoption, let's please not forget what happens in Lugano, because from what I'm aware of, you can pay tuition, you can pay your taxes. Can you tell us a little bit more, Paolo, how this is evolving, the evolution of really being able to transact directly with cryptos?
Sure. I spent some months, probably almost a year, to read all the regulation in Switzerland, anti-money laundering, etc. We are here, very important person here that are really concerned about that, just to understand if I could really adopt Bitcoin payments in a real, large way. So to me, adoption means I don't have to put limits, and the second adoption means like a fully automated system. I don't have to, be called by a citizen who wants to pay an invoice, and then I have to send a code, and then they pay, then I convert Bitcoin into francs, and then I register manually in the accounting. So it took me a year, but now finally on the 6th of December, I really launched the service. So all citizens, or also not citizens, anybody has to pay an invoice to the city of Lugano, he or she can pay now in Bitcoin and USDT with no limits in the amount. And this is, I'm respecting all the regulation, just to make it clear. And they can use the same invoice we send out that you can use to pay in the bank. So we use the same QR code, which is the normal QR code we have for payment in the banking system. Then you can pay with Bitcoin and USDT. So this is, to me, full adoption. And I actually, in the last 3 weeks, I got some interesting payments of taxes But you can really pay everything, not only taxes. Every single invoice we send out, you can pay it. I think we issue 350,000 invoices per year. So from fines to schooling or, I don't know, restaurant of the school, whatever, everything, parking tickets, everything can be paid in Bitcoin now.
Well, I guess that this part also is going to help the economy, specifically the economy of Ticino or the city of Lugano.
Well, first of all, I think people interested in spending their Bitcoin, because there are many people who has a lot of Bitcoin, or also not a lot, but some Bitcoins, and they can really come to Lugano, live in Lugano, live with Bitcoin. You can pay a restaurant, you can buy groceries, buy a house, buy a car. So you can really live with Bitcoin. Not really complete diffuse, but you can, even hotels and everything. And as a tourist, so I think tourism increased slightly in this community. So the community, as we said before, they move a lot. So many, maybe they come here to Lugano, spend 2-3 months, working from Lugano, spending their Bitcoin. So it's kind of interesting for this kind of an economy, yes.
Well, I guess that, again, a lot of information has been shared, valuable information from this morning until now. I thank you all, of course, for being present and coming for the second time. Let's see if somebody has some question, please.
What percentage of your payments are coming in Bitcoin to the city of Lugano? And is it broken into certain sectors that are taking a higher percentage of the Bitcoin payments?
Sure, it's really early to give numbers. And honestly, I think, after we launch everything, the Bitcoin just start rising. So people are keeping Bitcoins. We had payments in USDT, but also last week, 3 or 4 payments for taxation, for taxes in Bitcoin. So I was really surprised. So somebody is spending their Bitcoin to do that. Generally speaking, on the full amount of payments, it's really nothing, because we just started. And it won't be 10% or 20%. But it's just a sign to the community that if you want, you can do it. You can even pay in euro if you want. If somebody has to owe me taxes and say, I'm going to live in Italy, so can I pay in euro? I will accept euros. I will accept anything, which is, just before they leave, they don't pay the taxes or the invoices anymore. So to me, it's just one more service, and it's just adoption. Then it's there. You can use it, not use it. I'm not expecting 10% of the payment, but I'm expecting some payments, and they are coming. Effectively, they are coming. We would say until now, half USDT, half Bitcoins.
A truly open city economy, it sounds. One more.
Well, I have a follow-up question on this. What do you do with these coins that you receive? Do you keep them? Do you put them on your balance sheet, or you reconvert them back into fiat?
That's a big discussion. There is a law in Ticino for the municipalities. We have to respect the cantonal laws. I think this cantonal laws for the municipalities. The law says I cannot speculate on anything. I cannot buy shares and sell shares. I cannot buy euro just to wait the euro goes up and down and then change it. So I cannot buy Bitcoin, keep it and sell it later to gain or lose. So this is the law. My point of view is that if I accept a payment in Bitcoin and then I'm keeping Bitcoin and using later on, or maybe exchanging later on, that's to me just a treasury activity. But this is not the view of the politics, right? So we can discuss. I could buy options to cover the Bitcoin. There are treasury activities you do with Bitcoin, with USDT, etc. So I'm not keeping the Bitcoin. I'm just exchanging immediately at the same level of the Swiss franc. So if I have an invoice of 10,000, I receive 10,000, I book my accounting, that's it. Because imagine if I lose 1 franc on this, big discussion. If I lose 1 franc or 100,000 francs on the exchange of euro, nobody will just raise the issue, say, okay, you have lost because you had the euro. So I don't want to go into this discussion, but maybe in the future when a lot of companies accept Bitcoin here in Lugano, then I can pay my supplier in Bitcoin. Then is the point I can keep the Bitcoin and use the Bitcoin to pay my supplier. So that's the answer.
One more. Any more questions? I think we have time for one more. Yes.
So taking into account Vincent's AAA rating of Swiss digital bonds, have you looked into other avenues in order to increase the pristine collateral for Switzerland? Say, I think it was a few weeks ago, if not months, the New York Stock Exchange came out with the NACs, the Natural Asset Corporations, and i.e. Digitalizing carbon credits. Maybe that's another way of increasing collateral.
So, is the question for me or for
all of us?
all of us? Okay.
Well, also we've looked at carbon credits, for instance, as a potential instrument to be issued on the platform. I don't think that the problems in the voluntary carbon sector are associated so much with the fact that is it or is it not digital, or will the issues be resolved because it is digital? I think there's a whole bunch of issues around the entire value chain of that particular segment right now that I can't solve by just putting it onto blockchain. So we've looked at that and gone, there's too many pieces of the value chain that we're not involved in that mean that that we're not sort of solving a massive problem by getting involved in that specifically. So yeah, that would be my take on that. But Vincent?
Mm-hmm. No, I would agree with David. I think that for this very particular use case, blockchain can be somewhat helpful, but it's not going to solve everything. I mean, one of the issue that we have is that, with blockchain, okay, the data is immutable, and you can, how should I say, you can trust that it has not been tampered with after the moment it entered the blockchain. But what about everything that came before? Blockchain cannot ensure that the data that's written in the blockchain is accurate. So to me, that's a big obstacle.
Maybe what I can add here is what is interesting to see that the digital bonds that have been issued on SDX, including the one by Lugano, they are actually used as collateral in repo transactions with the Swiss National Bank. So commercial banks are using them as collateral when they do transactions with us. So that shows you also that these bonds are really just as good as the traditional bonds, even though they have been issued on a very new technology.
Okay, well, please let's give a big applause to our panelists.